Hi guys, today is Thursday, May 6th. We started off We started off math with and we actually changed this around quite a bit because we didn't finish. Let me update this. We finished Are you smarter than a fourth grader seesaw assignment? All right, so we finished this. So this is in Seesaw, and we've been working on it all week. We were playing different games. So today we played a fourth game, and we've been doing boys against girls, and we are tied it up. So tomorrow, let's see, where is it? Right here. So tomorrow is our final. We'll have a final game, and we'll get a clicked the wrong one. Final champion. Hold on, let me get out of Isaiah's. All right, I want this one. Come on. All right, there it goes. Okay, so let me start down here and kind of work my way. So page 18, 19, and 20, we did that as independent work. We went over page 17. So it says which angle has a measure closest to 30. And so we chose H. We looked at the types of angles. So you could see if it's a really big angle, we know it's obtuse. But if it's a smaller one, we know that that's acute. So the only ones that were acute were F and H. When we counted, F was 60. So that was double what we needed. And H was that 30 degrees. On page 16, I'm going to work my way backwards. Here on this question 2 at the bottom, we're counting. There's none of the rays are touching the zeros, so we have to count that in between. So we counted by tens and found that that was 110. Here, same thing. They're not touching 0. We have to count the in between. Remember, we measure our angles in degrees, and we're measuring the amount that's open. The number of degrees that it's or the amount that's open is measured in degrees. So from here to here, how many of those tens? And it was 40 there. Then on this bottom one on page 15, we went over, it says which ones appear to be rectangle. So a square, we talked about how a square is a rectangle because it meets the criteria. It has those 4 right angles, the opposite sides are the same, and but a rectangle cannot be a square because in order to be a square, the difference is you have to have all of your sides congruent, not just the opposite. And so that was P and R for that one. Then here we were looking at angles within shapes. So we drew a right triangle, we drew a right trapezoid, rectangle, and rhombus. So here the right trapezoid had 2 right angles, the right triangle had 1, this rectangle had 4, or all rectangles have 4, and the rhombus had 0. And so the one that had exactly 2 is that right trapezoid. Then on question 1, we looked at the polygons. So you have a rectangle, a triangle, and a square. And we said that each one of those had at least 1 right angle. For the first one, the parallel, the triangle didn't have any parallel sides. And then the rectangle and square, or all of them, none of them have any obtuse angles. And then the rectangle and square, they don't have any acute. Those are all right angles. So H was the only one that matched there. And then I think this is where we started, if I'm remembering correctly. So question 3, let me zoom this in. All right, so I'm on page 14, question 3. So it says Keith made a rectangular sign that had a perimeter of 48 inches. Which model could it represent? So here you've got these different rectangles, and it already told you the perimeter. So instead of saying perimeter equals and then all the sides, you just go ahead instead of writing this P, you just go ahead and put the 48. And then when you add up all the 12s, because this has a 12 on one side and a 12 on the other, and so if you did the opposite right here would be 12, and the opposite over here would be 12. So if you add up all those 12s, oh, what happened to my 2? That's a 2. All right, if you add up all those 12s, 12, 24, 36, 48, that's the one that matches. So A, of course, would be way too big because when you add this other 32, you're already in the 60s. That's way too much. And then the other one, same thing. On this one, that one side is 48, but remember, perimeter is all of the sides. So that would be way too much. And then this one just wasn't, this one was too small when we added those up. On number 2, going backwards here, it says Mr. Yates walks around the perimeter of a square. So make sure you draw your square. And then it says each side of the playground is 29. So if it's a square, I know this side is 29, this side is 29, this side is 29, and this side is 29. So to find that perimeter, you've got to add up all of those 29s. So it'd be 29 plus 29 plus 29 plus 29. Or you could just do 29 times 4 and get 116. Then on question 1, you have a rectangular top. So make sure you draw your rectangle. It has a length of 24 and a width of 17. And so, oh, my finger's not, there we go. My finger's not writing. All right, so if we want to find the area, remember that formula, area equals length times width. So we're going to take the length 24, multiply it by the width 17. And when you do that, you should get 408. So those were the problems that we solved for our game that we played today. And then, like I said, the last 3 pages were independent work. So this can go ahead and be turned in. And then tomorrow we'll have some more that we'll use for our game tomorrow. So let me get out of that. All right, then we played a Kahoot game after our independent work, and we're just reviewing angles. The chapters for Crenshaw for reading are right here, and we started working on, we didn't get to this part. Let me take that out. We worked a lot on section 3, so if you go here and go to activities, Crenshaw assignment 3. All right, so all of part 1. So the book is broken into different parts. Part 1 is current present time Jackson. He's going into the 5th grade, and part 2 is a flashback to when he's remembering what it was like the first time he met Crenshaw and the first time when his family was homeless and they had to live in their car. And so the flashback, we learned some things, kind of more about our characters. So Here's some things that we learned and where, some of those areas are in the text. And then on page 2, we haven't read this chapter yet, so we skipped over that. Page 3, we just labeled the settings so far. So part 1 is all in Jackson's apartment. Part 2 is mainly focusing on that time spent in the minivan. And then on page 4, we got this page on page 102, and this is just practicing our parts of speech. So nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and verbs. So we just went through and found some of those. Nouns are the people, places, things, ideas. Pronouns replace names. Adjectives are describing, and verbs are your action words. On page 5, we wrote a connection that we've made so far in the story. So it says, when we read, we understand and remember that we are reading more easily if we can find some comparisons between what's happening in the story and what has happened in our own life. So this is called making connections. So when you make connections, you are, sometimes when you're reading, you might be like, man, I really understand what this character is going through because I've dealt with the same thing. Or, I know someone that's dealt with the same thing. Or, hey, he's got a little sister just like me. And, or hey, I also had a favorite children's book when I was younger that I really connected to, or, just something like that. Or, maybe it was about maybe the way the character's feeling. So like how Jackson feels like he just wants his parents to tell him the truth. He feels like he's, old enough now, going into 5th grade. He's 10, 11 years old. He knows, he feels like he's old enough to, hear, no, like, we're having trouble. We're going to lose our house. This is, things are not okay right now. And his parents keep trying to um, oh my gosh, sugar. What am I trying to say? Nobody's in my room to help me. Sugarcoat. Thank you. All right. Brain finally worked. Thank you, brain. All right. So they're trying to just, oh, it's not that we're homeless. It's that we're just car camping. Excuse me. Let me get a drink. So they are, not just coming out with it, but they're just trying to, make it sound like it's just, a normal, everyday thing that happens. Down here, we put a fun fact that came from part of our reading, and then page 6 and 7, we'll get to these tomorrow. So go ahead and draft that. All right, then, so we spent quite a bit of time working on that because we were going back to the text and so on. And then our daily language review, this is in Seesaw. If you go to activities, you can go here to week 34 daily writing review. All right, so on the right-hand side, if you remember from part 1, Robin and Jackson have a game called Cereal Ball, and it's just a way for them to kind of get over, or not get over, but get through being hungry. So they try to make a basket into something, and if they make it, then they get a bite of cereal. And so instead of scarfing down a bowl of cereal and then still being hungry, they're trying to spread out the food to where it lasts longer. And so the game helps them kind of keep their mind off their hunger. And so It says make up a new game for Jackson and Robin to play when they get tired of cereal ball. And so it's a how-to, you're describing how you play your game. Then over on the left-hand side, we did some practice. This first one here, we needed an apostrophe because it's Mina's brother. So the brother belongs to Mina, so you're showing that ownership. Here, Mina needs to be capitalized because that's her name. The pronoun was they on this one right here, and they're waiting, so that would be the verb, your action word. Here you're picking the correct spelling, so Mina got quite scared in the haunted house. And then the correct way to spell this word ghost is on the bottom there. Then we have one more for tomorrow, so go ahead and draft. Then for science today, we went back to Seesaw and continued talking about inherited traits and learned behaviors. So we reviewed what we covered. Let me open it. All right, so we reviewed what we covered yesterday with inherited traits and learned behaviors. So we've talked about this for a couple days now. And so we were just reviewing before we started our test. And we were just going over, we had a chance to share over on the how-to part. So we were sharing some of our learned behaviors. And so people were sharing, how you cook something or how you play something or how you roller skate or how you draw something. So this page 15, we had quite a few people share something that they've learned. So again, a learned behavior is a behavior that you've either you've learned it from experience. So like maybe not necessarily that someone taught you, but maybe you were just like really determined to get something down. And so you just kept working at it and you eventually learned how to do it. Then you can also learn, of course, from people teaching you things and, watching someone else do something. So learn behaviors, that keyword learn, you had to learn to do it. You weren't just born. It's not an instinct that was passed on to you from your parents. So we talked about that and we did lots of sharing. And then just to go through here, here's what should be done so far. So you've got vocab here. We reviewed those the other day. We've got all of our definitions filled in. Each one of these should have what the definition is. We rearranged page 3, so it should look like this, and you should have watched both of those. So the other thing that was on here you can take off. We didn't get to that. Page 4, this should have your traits. Page 5, we talked about we talked about examples of traits that are affected by the environment. So even though your parents passed on something to you, parents pass off things to their offspring, the environment can change those. They can affect them. Then on page 6, we listed some of our different instincts. Page 7, we listed some of our learned behaviors. Here we read about the father of genetics. Same on page 9. And then we answered on page 10. We also did our lab where we saw the DNA on page 11 and 12. Page 13, once you have read the directions, delete those. You're going to upload a photo of yourself and then talk about where you got those traits from. So thinking about your parents, we read about Tessa's big day. And on Tessa's big day, you're going to take that information that you read about and you're going to list some inherited traits and learned behaviors. Then your learned behavior where you're teaching someone how to do something. So a how-to paragraph that's going to help someone else learn how to do that as well. This we did with the different traits. So you need to get a coin, or you can go, there's coins online that we used if we didn't have a coin. If you flip heads, your monster that you're drawing is very big versus tails would be small. So the way that you draw it is determined by these things here, whether you got heads or tails. And then we started today, we went ahead and started the traits and behaviors test. So this offspring, I was reading the word, this vocabulary here, you can go back up to page 2. You should have all that there you can use. And then we talked about these. So if the following trait is inherited through genes, place a check mark on the line. So a person's ability to roll their tongue is an inherited trait. So we went ahead and checked that off. Color of a cat's eyes, a person's dimples. So those things are passed on. A person's weight, now that could change because if you live a very sedentary life, you don't move around a lot, and you eat a lot of foods that are not healthy for you, that could change your weight. Also the size of a dog's leg muscles. So I gave the example, I have 2 dogs. One is super lazy. All she wants to do is lay around all day. She doesn't play fetch. She doesn't like her toys. She is a big couch potato. So she has a beanbag and she lives in it. My other dog, however, is super active. She likes to go running. She's constantly got a toy in her mouth wanting to play fetch. So the size of the dog's leg muscles, of course, the one that's more active is going to be a lot stronger, not because of what her parents passed on to her as the offspring, but just because of her activity level. Then here, we talked about this a while back when we were talking about what our parents are passing on to us. And so we talked about how each parent has 2 genes for eye color. And so on this first example, so let me get my marker here. So on the first example, we'll do mom here and dad over here. So on the first one, mom's 2 options are she's got 1 blue eye trait, and dad, well, I've got the blue out. Dad has 2 blue eyes traits. Draw my little creepy eyes here. And then mom's other one is brown. Let me get the brown color here. And so when we talked about this, we said that brown is the dominant trait. So you can do different combinations with this. You can start with mom's blue eye, and you could go to one of dad's blue eye. So that would be one combination. And so if they're passing on blue and blue, then yes, that child is going to have blue eyes because there's no other dominant, it's just blue and blue. That's your only option. Mom can also pass on this 1 blue gene for blue eyes and can go to dad's other, and that would be blue and blue again. So yes, again, that child could have blue eyes. Then mom could pass on the brown, and dad could pass on his blue. That child would have brown eyes because the brown is dominant. And then dad could pass on his other blue and mom's brown, and that child would still have brown. So there's a 50-50 chance that that child could have blue eyes. So yes, it is possible. So you're going to go through and you're going to look at the 2 options. So brown, 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 brown. Is there any possibility for that child to have blue eyes? Then on this next one, mom has brown and blue, and dad has brown and brown. Is there any chance for this child? Remember, one is coming from mom, one is coming from dad. If a brown shows up at all, brown eyes it is. Brown is dominant. Okay, so remember when I talked about, my 2 dogs and one is a lot more dominant than the other, that one kind of takes charge. Same thing, brown takes charge. Then on page 19, you have some questions here about different inherited traits. learned behaviors, things like that we've been talking about. So go ahead and go through there. And we had library today, so make sure on your seesaw for library, she talked about the different books that are coming up for next year's Texas, what's it called? Texas Bluebonnet Award Program. So they were watching some of the previews and the book trailers and things like that for these books that are getting ready to come out. So there was 4, 5, about 20 books on this list for next year. And so there's a tracking where you could go ahead and start. And especially over the summer, these would be some really good ones to read over the summer. And then next year, hopefully they'll be able, they didn't this year because of everything going on, but hopefully next year they'll be able to do more. But I think if you get 5, she said, there's some kind of incentive where you get a prize or something like that. And then, so we just started the test. We'll finish it tomorrow. So I'm going to put on here, start test. And then over here, I'll put that we are finishing test. All right, for social studies, when everybody came back from the library, we played, oh, I'm going to the wrong spot. In Google Classroom, under classwork, we played this Texas Symbols bingo game. And so when you open this, you move the symbols over to the left-hand side to create your bingo board. And then we did different games, like we made a T, and then we made an X for the abbreviation for Texas. Then we did a regular bingo. So we were playing different ways, but we were practicing these symbols on here. So if you missed it, maybe you could write down the different symbols and have someone call them out and do something similar like that if you'd like. Then you can turn that in when you're done with that. And then at the end of the day, we went to this multiplication review, and we got started on this, going over some multiplication questions. We did this with partners. So thank you to the ones that have that drafted and participated in that. And that was the end of our day. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions.